Okay, we're in the closing bracha of the Amidah. This is known as Sim Shalom. It ends with, we're requesting God to bring peace upon us. So in this last blessing, the first thing we ask is Sim Shalom. And as I mentioned in the beginning of the last portion of Vayikra, which is B'chokosai, Chazal tell us, Im yesh shalom yesh hakol. If you have peace, you have everything. And if you have no peace, you can have everything and you have nothing. Peace is external and internal. If you feel safe, you're secure, and you're emotionally stable, and you're at peace with yourself, you have everything. If you're not secure, either due to external reasons or internal reasons, you're not at peace with yourself, you could have everything and you have nothing. So peace is crucial for the function and the viability of a human being and the world. So we ask God, Sim Shalom, you should place peace. That's first and foremost. Tova, you should place goodness. I mean, whatever we have, it should truly be goodness. You know, people have success in their lives, but it doesn't generate any goodness. It's sometimes wealth or success is a curse. Peace, tova. It should be good, goodness. Ubracha, blessing. Blessing means it's something which is not stagnant. It's not finite. Blessing flows. It flows beyond yourself. It flows to others. That's blessing. We say a person's a blessed person. Chen. Now this is interesting. Chen, as we said, is charm. It's more than charisma. You know, certain people have charisma. It's a charm. We find the concept of chen mentioned twice in the Torah. The Torah tells us that when Yosef was sold by his brothers into slavery, and ultimately he arrived in Egypt, he was purchased by Potiphar. Sarah Tabochim. There's a question what he was. Potiphar, the minister of the purveyors of meat, or he was the minister of execution. He was the chief executioner of Egypt. Could you imagine? Yosef couldn't fall into a worse location. And the man is a minister, he's phenomenally wealthy. And immediately, Yosef finds chen in the eyes of his master. He finds a special charm. His master recognizes it goes beyond his ability, finances, and genius and beauty. There's something about him. There's a chen. There's a charm. That's the first time it's mentioned, chen. The second time it's mentioned, before he left Egypt, the Jews were told to borrow the personal effects of the Egyptians, the silver and gold vessels from the masters. And initially it wasn't so simple. How does a slave have the audacity, and how brazen could you be to ask the master, I'd like to borrow your Rolex oyster watch, that if you die and you're 100 feet below the surface, it keeps perfect time. We do have such chutzpah, right? And yet the Torah tells us, V'yitein Hashem escheinu om b'einim Mitzrayim. God caused that the Jewish people should be seen with chen in the eyes of the Egyptians. So when the subject, the chattel of the Egyptian, says to his master, I'd like to borrow your gold vessel, your gold cup, your gold plate, your gold piece of jewelry, the master says to the slave, it would be my honor. Because he saw the Jew in such a special light. The Jew had a special level of distinction due to this charm. The master treated the slave as if he was the master, and the subject was serving the master. It was a miracle. V'yitein Hashem escheinu om be'enim Mitzrayim. So chen, to be seen in a special light and to be almost revered because of that. I see you as special. Could you imagine? We speak about the 10 martyrs who were murdered by the Romans. Rabbi Akiva was the greatest of the Torah sages of that era because he taught Torah publicly in a public setting. He was put to death. He had the flesh scathed off his body. He was a man of such holiness, Rabbi Akiva, that when they came to the location of his tefillin, a baskal, heavenly voice came out. And when he concluded the Shema Yisrael, he said, Echod. And his soul departed that moment. This heavenly voice said, Rabbi Akiva, you are holy, your soul is holy, and you have a share in the world to come. I mean, how could these monsters not recognize? The man radiated holiness. He radiated, literally, holiness. But somehow they weren't impressed. Because as you say in English, beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. The way you perceive something and you behold something, it's the way God wants you to behold it. And because they were the atonement for the Jewish people, the 10 martyrs, despite their radiance, despite their one-of-a-kind of human beings that overshadowed all existence in every sense of the word, the Romans did not have the capacity to appreciate what their value was because there was no chen. Because chen is something which God gives. That's the charm, that you perceive somebody as being special. It's like people say, there's something about this person, I can't put my finger on it, but I know he's special. There's an aura. It's an aura. That's what chen is. Yosef had that aura. And because he had that aura, what did his master do? He gave over the full responsibility to oversee all his personal affairs, his financial affairs. And Potiphar was secure with letting Yosef oversee everything because he found chen in the eyes of his master. But chen is what? That's God-given. And if God wants to pull the plug on that, you can have the most virulent anti-Semitism. The non-Jew who saw you as special, all of a sudden gets a bug in his head and says, these Jews, the whole thing is a cabal. This is the protocols of Zion. It's a plot to take over the world. They duped us until now. Until now, I was impressed. Now I realize they're all along, we're a bunch of fools. That's the anti-Semitism. So anti-Semitism, because God withdraws that level of understanding, perception, to see us special. But what the Jews contributed even to secular society, whether it's the sciences, culture, the arts, everything. The world doesn't even make even a partial part of that contribution. Salk, Sedin, Einstein, all these people. These are heroes in the secular world. We're not impressed. The anti-Semitism is not impressed. You can take it and leave with it. We're not interested in you people. Because God, as I said, when God chooses to put you in a different light, as they say, the lights are off. They don't recognize it. It doesn't resonate. There's a word, resonate. That word, till I came to New York, I didn't hear that word that often. I know what the word meant, resonates. When you ask a person to do a mitzvah, he says, I hear what you're saying, Rabbi, but it doesn't resonate with me. Sure, if your soul is comatose, of course it doesn't resonate. Of course, your spiritual senses are not operative. They're not functioning. Of course it doesn't resonate. What resonates is what? Something which has fragrance, belonging to that country club where you pay $1 million fee to belong to the country club. That resonates because that's your ego, that's your glory. and everybody strokes your glory. That's the reason. But chen is God-given. So we ask God, place peace, place bracha, chen. If you have chen, you can be influential. You can influence the world. Avraham Avinu initially was a pariah. After he defeated the four mightiest kings, what was he proclaimed by the world? He was proclaimed as the Prince of God. All humanity proclaimed him. Do you know what level of Kiddush Hashem that is? That's the ultimate sanctification of God's name. That's chen. V'chesed. Give us chesed. Chesed means indiscriminate kindness, meaning even with unworthy, provided. V'rachmim, mercy. Mercy means that even though we're culpable, and you're able to stay at the execution, to give us other chances, we're willing to pay the debt, but right now we're not able to. We're not ready for it yet. Or dole it out over an extended period of time, rather than to get the brunt of God's justice. Oleinu v'al Yisrael amecha. Upon us and Israel, you're the people. Is what we're asking. You know, you meet a pauper in the street, a homeless guy, homeless person, and you say, "Hey, buddy, could you lend me $1,000?" The man says, "I'm begging for a cup of coffee." Are you out of your mind? Ask me for $1,000. He says, "You know, forget about the 1,000. What about $10,000?" The man says, "Did you hear what I just said? I don't have enough money to buy a cup of coffee, and you ask me for $10,000." So Pearson walks by and says, "You know, the man is right. You only ask a person only if there's a consideration he's able to provide to respond to your request. So if we stand before God and we say, God, place peace among us, give blessing, give charm, give this charisma, give us chesed, give us rachmin, give us all this, evidently, the only reason why we're asking God, because we understand that there's nothing beyond God's ability. God has the capacity to provide everything which we ask. The question is, are we worthy? But that we ask itself has value. Do you know why? Because it's an acknowledgement that there's nothing which is not within the realm of God's ability. Understanding that, making the request and going and asking God, of course, we need the worthiness and we need the mercy. But that we acknowledge that God is the Almighty, there's nothing which he can't do. That itself gives us merit when we come and make the request. Years ago, there was a certain person came to Yad Avram, he's not alive any longer. And he used to tell a joke, you know, in the 20s, you know, you had, in the Penn Station, you had red caps. So the average red cap was a Negro. And the person who, the red cap, had taken his bags, he wanted to tip him. But he didn't have anything less than a $10 bill. And $10 in the 20s was a lot of money. So he says to the Negro red cap, he says, by the way, could you break a 10? He says, thank you for the compliment. The Negro says, thank you for the compliment. You think I have $10? That was a compliment. You got it? So if we say to Hashem, Lahavdil Elef Havdolos, God, give us peace, give us goodness, give us blessing, give us charm, give us chesed, give us rachmin, give us everything. What are we saying? We're saying God is everything. And because he is everything, therefore there's a basis to ask for everything. Now there's a separate question. Are we worthy? Do we have that level of worthiness? But at least it's an acknowledgement of who God is. Unfortunately, you know, people, we come to the last blessing of the Amidah, we've been already standing for 43 seconds, and we're in the home stretch, and we say this blessing within about 3 seconds. As we're explaining every word, The value of each one of these requests is a lifetime blessing. Peace. It's life. You have peace, you have everything. You have blessing, you have everything. You have chen, you have chesed, you have each one. And yet, like a blink of an eye, we just gloss over everything. It's not to be believed and understood to what degree how we short sell ourselves. But here we have the opportunity to cash in. And yet, as they say in the vernacular, we blow it. The last moment, we go for the home base to take those 3 steps out, and it's over. But if you stop and think for a moment, the value of what we're saying, you go through the Forbes 500. Somebody says, I'm going to introduce you to Mr. Number 1, and then 2 and 3. And there's a pecking line. And Mr. 1, the guy's worth whatever, maybe it's Bezos, maybe it's this guy, this other one. And you look at him, it says, oh, you're that, you go right on to the next guy. Next person, the guy's worth $300 billion. And at best, you give him a glance. What does the man feel? I've never been insulted like this in my life. Here I have all this value. And I could do many things with that value. And you don't give me a moment's notice. Who ever heard of such a thing? Here we're talking to God. For God alone, you should give him all the notice. But here, what's in it for us? Everything's in it for us. Every level of blessing in our lives. And what do? We just gloss over it. As if by rote, we say the words quickly and we're already stepping out. Blessed are you, God, who blesses his people with peace. Okay? May he rest in peace, as we say. That's what you say usually when you put the man in the grave. And the rabbi eulogy, may he rest in peace. Peace upon you. Okay? If that's where it begins, that's where it ends, as they say in Yiddish, Achin vei. Woe to us if that's the way we relate to what the value of this is. Could you imagine you work for a company and you have documents, and those documents you're able to actually retrieve hundreds of millions of dollars, and you have a simple office worker and you have the original copies, and you say, hey, Jim, could you shred those papers on the desk? And taking the papers he takes these documents, shreds them. Could you imagine? The man who owns those documents, he loses his mind. He says, do you know what you just shredded? My whole life just went through the shredder. But yet, we say Sim Shalom, which is our life plus, it's our eternity. We put it right through the shredder. That's it. It's slippery slope. And by the time we finish, we start, we're finished. We're already at the bottom of the pit. This is just to sensitize us in terms of the value of every word and the focus. It's interesting. All the blessings of the Amidah are always in plural, never in singular. But here we say something else. We say, all this you should put upon us. Us is plural. Us, Val Kol Yisrael Amecho. Us and your Israel, your people. Isn't us Israel? If we see ourselves as part of the Jewish people, what do we have to add? Val Kol Yisrael Amecho. And upon Israel, your people. Give you an example. The law of charity is an expression, charity begins at home. Charity begins at home, and that is the law. If you have a relative to support and a stranger to support, you're supposed to support your relative before you support a stranger. Although the other person is a Jew, as your relative is a Jew. And it's based on a verse in Prophets. It says, Bibsorcha al tisalem. You should not turn a blind eye on your flesh. We're talking about a person who's worthy to be helped. He's a good person. He needs help. A third party needs help. Your relative, the one's close to, takes first priority. If you have the poor of your community have to be supported, poor of other community. You should first support the poor of your own community. That is the priority. What's closest home, that's what you should be more responsible to. So the word aleinu means us, means those who have relevance to us, those which are in our proximity, those that touch our lives. And that's why most people live their lives, and in the level of consciousness, it's what's closest to you. What's the other end of the world? We're not touched by them. Therefore, maybe I don't have them in mind. The answer is no. When I say Oleinu, upon us, we'll call Yisrael Amecha. And every Jew, wherever he may be, your people, the Jewish people. When I say me, us, I mean all of us. Many years ago, there was a person, came to Yad Avram, graduated law school, a secular Jew. His father lived in Hollywood, Florida. And he became observant, fully observant. He's married today, has a family, thank God. And I said to him, there was a tragedy, there was a terrorist attack in Tel Aviv. 23 Jews were killed in this terrorist attack many years ago. So I said to this person, when you discuss this with your father, or if you discussed it, how would your father react to this tragedy? He said to me, if you hear about 100 people being killed in Angola, it would be no different than hearing about these 23 Jews being killed in Tel Aviv, terrorist attack. Although he knew he was a Jew, he was so divorced from the Jewish people, it had no relevance to his life. Because that has no relevance to his life, he had no feeling for other Jews whatsoever. He didn't see it as any greater tragedy than any tragedy within humanity. There was nothing personal. He wasn't personally touched. That's how divorced a person could be from who he is and who his people are. When we ask for all these very special requests, peace, blessing, indiscriminate kindness, mercy, everything, Oleinu, it's not only those within my proximity. Those people touch my life. It's called Amcha Yisrael. Every Jew, your nation Israel is me, that's I, that's who I am. We're one unit, one entity. And when you ask not only for yourself, you ask for others, and others are no less important than yourself, then God sees you in a different light. That's almost asking almost on a selfless level. When you ask for others and the other has no less importance than yourself, that's an expression of humility. We're not self-centered and egotistic. So all these things I'm pointing out elevates the quality of our request. It puts it on another plane. To be worthy, to be responded to. Firstly, we acknowledge who God is, that God could provide these. And he wants to provide it. Because there's not a consideration, what are we wasting our time? Why wasting his time? And on top of that, when we ask for all these things, and we do acknowledge it, it's not for us, it's for self-interest. We're interested in all the Jewish people, no less than anyone else. That every one of us has the same level of importance. And as a result of putting the emphasis on that, it gives it another value in God's eyes, and therefore it gives us a better chance that we should respond to our supplication.